A Jet2 flight lifts off from Tenerife on a warm evening, climbing out over the Atlantic and turning north for Birmingham, a journey of around 4.5 hours. 220 passengers settle in for the overnight run home. Families, couples, holidaymakers with sunburn and duty-free bags, ready to be home. They are expecting a routine flight. The crew is quiet. The weather is clear for miles in every direction. Every sign a passenger can read says this is the safest stretch of the whole journey. But something is already wrong. What was supposed to be a routine flight home turns into chaos at 30,000 feet. The captain suddenly becomes seriously unwell at the controls, in the dark, with no warning. Passengers described visibly distressed cabin crew moving quickly through the cabin, asking for medical professionals. And now, the first officer has taken control. One pilot, 220 lives behind him. Seconds to think. This is the story of Jet2 Flight LS1266. It begins on the evening of May 21st, 2026. Flight LS1266 is one of the most unremarkable services in European aviation. Jet2, Tenerife South to Birmingham. Sun and sea holiday traffic running north out of the Canary Islands back to the Midlands. People fly this route in flip-flops. They board with duty-free bags and sunburn and sand still in their shoes. On this Thursday evening, around 220 of them filed onto the aircraft for the journey home. Families, couples, holidaymakers who had spent a week on the beaches of Tenerife and were now flying back overnight, expecting to land in the small hours and be in their own beds by sunrise. A flight you sleep through. It is roughly a 4.5-hour run north over the Atlantic, up the coast of Portugal, across the Bay of Biscay, into the UK. Nothing about the night was a factor. No storms, no fog, no mechanical squawk on the aircraft. This was not a flight set up to fail. This was a flight that did everything right. Up front sat two pilots. Their names, their ages, or their flight hours have not been made public. To sit in the left seat of an Airbus A321 on a commercial passenger flight, a captain has passed thousands of training hours, recurrent simulator checks at fixed intervals, and a medical examination that he has to renew on a strict schedule for his entire career. Commercial airline pilots are among the most medically screened workers on the planet. Heart, blood pressure, vision, cognition, all of it, checked, logged, and signed off by an aviation medical examiner, again and again, year after year. That is exactly what makes this story so unsettling. This was not a reckless man. This was not a sick man who slipped through. By every measure the industry uses, this was a fit, certified professional doing a routine job on a calm night. And there is one hazard that no flight plan, no maintenance check, and no medical screening can ever fully design out. Not weather, not terrain, not the machine. The human body. You can inspect the engines, you can verify the fuel, you can check the forecast, the runway, and the navigation database. You cannot check whether a healthy man's heart is going to hold for the rest of the flight, because nobody can see that coming. The aircraft leveled off in the cruise. The cabin lights went down. 220 people settled in for the overnight run home. And up front, at 30,000 feet, the captain's life began running out of time. They were flying an Airbus A321. The A321 is the largest member of Airbus's single-aisle family. A stretched, twin-engine, narrow-body workhorse that airlines across Europe use for exactly this kind of medium-haul holiday route. Jet2 is rapidly expanding its fleet with the type and its newer A321 Neo variant, modernizing away from the older Boeing 737s it flew for years. It is a modern, reliable aircraft, proven across millions of flight hours. There was nothing wrong with this airplane. But here is the design feature that decided everything that followed. The A321 is built to be flown by two pilots, and it is built so that either one of them can fly it completely alone if they have to. This is not an accident. It is the entire philosophy of the modern flight deck. Every control the captain has, the first officer has a mirror of on the other side of the cockpit. Two side sticks, two full primary flight displays. The thrust levers sit on the center pedestal, within easy reach of either pilot. The aircraft does not care which seat is giving the orders. If one pilot is taken out of the equation, the other can fly it, navigate it, talk on the radio, and land it without ever needing the other seat to wake up. On top of that, the A321 is fly-by-wire. The pilot's inputs are interpreted by flight computers that keep the jet inside a safe flight envelope, quietly carrying part of the workload during exactly the kind of high-stress, single-pilot moment that was about to unfold. Years ago, in the skies over Florida, a passenger named Doug White was forced to land a King Air turboprop after the only pilot on board died at the controls. He survived, barely, thanks to an autopilot, a calm air traffic controller, and a very long runway. But he survived by a thread, because there was no second trained pilot anywhere on that aircraft. LS1266 was the opposite situation. When one pilot went down on this flight, there was still a fully qualified, current, type-rated professional sitting 3 feet away, hands-free, with a complete second set of controls in front of them. That is the difference between a tragedy and a diversion. That is the difference between 2 seats and 1. Before we go any further, if this kind of breakdown is what you come here for, hit the like button now. It genuinely helps this channel reach people who care about how aviation actually keeps them safe. Now, here's the moment everything changed. There is no released black box transcript from this flight. No official minute-by-minute timeline. What we have is the aircraft's track, the time it landed, and the accounts of the people who were sitting in that cabin. And together, they tell a clear enough story. Somewhere in the cruise, over or near the Portuguese coast, the captain became unwell. Passengers later reported hearing the crew mention a suspected cardiac emergency, though no official medical details have been released. In the cabin, the first sign anyone had was the crew. Passengers describe being woken not by a calm announcement, but by movement and noise. Cabin crew coming quickly down the aisles, visibly distressed, some of them in tears, calling out for any doctor or medically trained passenger to come forward. One passenger told reporters they were jolted awake by chaos, flashing lights, upset cabin crew searching for help, their own young child crying along with other children across the cabin as the aircraft began to descend. And it descended fast, a sudden, sharp loss of altitude, the kind of rate that tells you the people flying the aircraft have stopped thinking about your comfort and started thinking about the ground. That descent was not panic. That descent was a procedure. Here is what was happening behind the locked door. The instant the captain was incapacitated, the flight deck of LS1266 went from a 2-person operation to a 1-person operation. In the dark, in the cruise, with 220 people behind that door and a medical crisis unfolding in the adjacent seat. The first officer was now alone. Think about everything that lands on one person in that moment. You have to recognize fast that your captain is not just unwell, but incapacitated, that he cannot help you, and may even become a hazard if his body slumps against the controls. You have to take positive, sole control of the aircraft. You have to call the cabin crew forward to manage the medical side, because you cannot leave the controls to do CPR yourself. You have to get on the radio, declare an emergency, and get a clearance to descend and divert. You have to choose an airport, brief an approach you may never have flown before, configure the aircraft, and put it on a runway by yourself in the middle of the night, with adrenaline flooding your system and a colleague fighting for his life beside you. This is the single hardest scenario in the airline pilot's profession that does not involve the aircraft itself braking. And it is trained for relentlessly. Pilot incapacitation is a standard item in recurrent simulator sessions. Crews rehearse the takeover, the unresponsive colleague drill, the single pilot diversion, the whole grim sequence in a simulator by people who hope they will never need it. The first officer needed an airport, and they needed it now. Every minute spent at 30,000 feet was a minute further from a hospital and a minute longer before the passengers were back on solid ground. The priority in a serious in-flight medical emergency is brutally simple and absolute. Get this aircraft down at a suitable airport as fast as it can safely be done. The nearest suitable airport was Porto's Francisco Sá Carneiro Airport on the northern coast of Portugal. The aircraft turned for Porto and started down. In the cabin, this is the part that the passengers felt in their stomachs, the rapid descent, the pressure in their ears. The children are crying, the flight attendants are strapping in. From a seat in the back, with no information and no window into the cockpit, it would have felt like the aircraft was falling. It wasn't falling, it was being flown, precisely, deliberately, by one trained professional executing a procedure they had practiced in a simulator more times than they could count. The A321 came down the descent, lined up on the approach into Porto, and touched down safely on the runway at 2:11 in the morning, local time, the early hours of Friday, the 22nd of May. Emergency services were already waiting on the ground. The moment the aircraft stopped, paramedics boarded, reached the cockpit, and began emergency first aid on the captain before he was taken off the aircraft and rushed to a nearby hospital. And here is the number that matters most. All passengers and crew survived the diversion and landing. No injuries, no casualties on board. The aircraft was on the ground, intact, with a runway full of ambulances and fire crews, and the one person in serious danger was the man being carried toward a waiting hospital. The flying was the triumph. What came next was not. The passengers were not allowed off the aircraft for over an hour after landing. When they finally were, there was no real plan for them. One passenger described being stranded at Porto's Francisco Sá Carneiro Airport for more than 13 hours with no accommodation to simply wander the terminal, told that hotel rooms were too expensive. Many of them were families with small children, all of them running on no sleep and a spent tank of adrenaline, were left sitting in a foreign airport for over half a day. Jet2's job now was to get them home. The airline flew a replacement pilot from Manchester down to Porto to take the aircraft on to Birmingham and offered affected passengers complimentary transfers onto any of its flights to 14 UK destinations over the following week. In its statement, the airline kept it brief. The flight diverted because a pilot felt unwell. At no point was safety compromised. Customers continued their journey, and it apologized for the unforeseen delay. If you've made it this far, it's because you want the real version of these stories. A quick like or subscribe helps this channel keep digging. Now, to the real question. With no formal investigation coming, why did this flight end the way it did? This is unlikely to result in a major public accident investigation because the aircraft landed safely and the event appears to have been medical rather than mechanical. So instead of waiting for a report that may never come, let's look at what already explains the outcome. The first layer is the second pilot. Modern commercial aviation does not put a single human being in sole charge of a passenger jet, precisely because human beings are fragile. The second pilot is not a co-driver or a luxury. The second pilot is the backup system for the single most unpredictable component on the entire aircraft, the first pilot. When the captain went down, the redundancy the whole industry is built around did exactly what it was designed to do. The second layer is the aircraft itself. The A321's dual, mirrored controls and fly-by-wire protections meant the surviving pilot had a complete, fully capable jet under their hands. The third layer is the training. Incapacitation drills, single pilot diversion procedures, cabin crew medical response. Every one of those is rehearsed in advance, and every one of them was visibly carried out that night. The fourth layer is the ground. A suitable airport with a long runway and standing emergency services existed within reach, and the system put the aircraft there, with paramedics waiting at the threshold. Now contrast that with the cases where these flights end in death, and there have been others on this exact kind of route. Jet2 alone has had passengers die from medical emergencies mid-flight on services out of Tenerife in recent years, despite crews, defibrillators, and rapid diversions. Sometimes the body simply cannot be saved in the time available at altitude, no matter how fast and how well everyone responds. That is the hard truth underneath this story. The system on LS1266 worked almost perfectly. It got the aircraft down, it got the patient to a hospital, it protected over 200 lives. And here's where we have to be straight with you, because this is recent news and the picture is still incomplete. The captain's name has not been released. His condition has not been made public. There is no official timeline of what was said and done on that flight deck, and there may never be one. What you have heard is built from the first wave of reporting and from Jet2's own short statement, and that is everything that is confirmed as of now. If more comes out, we will come back to this story. If this story is worth something to you, a like helps others find it. Subscribe if you want more stories told this way, carefully, from the documents, and with the respect they deserve. We will see you in the next one.